Okay, so now Beth is 20 and 2,500. And you know what? Let's see if she's up on her Alekhine theory. What you got, Beth? C6 is an inaccuracy. That's cute. Bishop d2, though. That one's not in my schema. Engine's already out of book. Got it. You're going to let me do that. Okay. Let's just finish development. Okay, everything seems normal and natural. I can go for my E5 break here. I don't see any major issues with doing so. Let's do it. Okay, I definitely like my position and its solidity, even though, I mean, white's got the first move advantage. It's typical in these like classical Alekhine type structures, which I talk about in my book on the Alekhine, which you have to admit to yourself at some point that you're always worse with black in the opening if your opponent knows what they're doing. So let's see if we can't make something out of this, if we can finesse a little. I want to improve the position. If I trade rooks and go rook e8, the a7 pawn may be a problem. So can I force things a bit? Takes, queen takes, rook e8, queen f2, c5. And that does force things, but white would have knight b5, hitting the queen and bishop, and I don't want to give my b. That does not sound good for me. If I go b6 immediately, though, that's one of the ideas. Let's just try that. Okay. Pawns will be weak. I want to force things. Bishop is not as important anymore. Feels somewhat necessary. Queen d6. Solid enough with the pin. Covering the b pawn. Now, I'd like to bother this bishop. But it does come at a cost, I think. Important moves change the pawn structure. I'm thinking about like a6 and c5. But there's lots of consequences. I mean, it's the thing is this knight is not good. If I could trade off the knight for the bishop, I think black is definitely not worse. The bishop gives a little bit of edge here, but you want to liquidate some when playing against engines to make sure that you're not going to miss anything tactically. At least that's what I do. If you're very tactically gifted, go right ahead. Go try to go toe to toe. Human error can creep its ugly head in though, and that can be problematic. So, speaking of getting pieces better, let's get pieces better. Breaking the pin. We go queen e6, knight g5. What about queen e7? Keeping an eye on the b4 pawn. Queen e7 seems flexible. And c5 is surprising to me because I felt that in the long term, locking the pawns on the same color as the bishop would be a mistake, but potentially there's some theme that I'm misunderstanding here. Only one way to find out is locking it up and seeing what Beth does. Very forcing play. Let's go ahead and do Mr. Natural here. Looking to provoke some weaknesses, I see. If I simply go f6 and blunt the bishop, that's my first reaction. Knight f5, queen e6. Flexible. Yeah, if I could trade queens somehow, that would be amazing. I think I could potentially win because of these pawn dynamics on the queen side. G6. That's a question. If they go G6, knight d6, knight takes, pawn takes, can they get in? I mean, I feel like I've got to press this issue because if the bishop gets to g3 and white gets fully coordinated, that could be a problem. Okay. And if I go queen d4, or queen d5 rather, seems reasonable. Okay, my knights are covering the key squares. Solid. Very solid. So good. Not okay with a draw. I understand your point. I would not either. If knight g7, h5 does not work anymore, so knight g7, queen f4. Knight e6. Knight takes e6, queen takes e6, queen c7. Oh yeah, you know it's getting serious when the body language changes and I start actually trying to calculate. It's one of those things. This is probably one of the fun activities is trying to treat it like I don't know, a 15-minute game or so, where you have enough time to think in critical moments, but you kind of go quickly through the opening and just get a position. Let's try it. And if knight e6, knight takes e6, queen takes e6, queen c7. I was having trouble following up from there. If I go back to d5 and queen a7, for instance, knight e5 could be very, very problematic for white because the f-pawn isn't easily guarded. You can check me, and that would be a perpetual, more than likely. Scared not to trade, though. That's kind of the problem that I'm having. Engines are good. I don't see a way to try to force the trade of queens, and if I wait around too much, white's going to open up the king side. So let's go with a forcing move. Now, that helps me accomplish all of my hopes and dreams. That I'm not a fan of. Let's clip. And 100% clip you. And now we've got this knight versus bishop ending where most of my pawns are on the opposite color of the bishop. So I feel at least good about my chances. I don't know if I can win it, but okay. Pawn in hand. Let's get more pawns on the opposite color of the bishop. But first, okay. Went from slightly worse, maybe holding, to winning. Nice transition. Not from stellar play on my part, but just inaccurate play by the engine. Beth. Sorry, need to keep this facade going. So let's put them away in the most efficient way possible, shall we? Because I really don't want to botch this game. That would be embarrassing at this point. Because this was what I was aiming for as my best shot for a win. It's all about keeping that under wraps. If I go knight, like the two candidate moves, and this is what you should do anytime you're in the process of trying to figure out positions like this. If the plan doesn't just jump out at you, it's like, oh yeah, this works because you do candidate moves. And you break down the position as typically come up with 3 candidate moves. You know, Kotov's think like a grandmaster thinking process, and compare those moves against each other. And then sometimes it's called for, you need raw calculation in order to figure it out. So f5 check and knight b6 are the 2 candidate moves that jump out at me. F5 does make a change in the position because f5, pawn takes, and king f4 where the white king could potentially get in via g5 and then go to h6, and that's no bueno. So knight b6, king d4, knight c4, king c5, and then king d7. And I think I'm missing something there, because knight b6, king d4, knight c4, king c5. If I move the king, white can take on f6. Knight b6, king d4, knight c4, king c5, knight takes a3, king takes c6. And the problem that I'm having here is that, say, after knight b1, bishop e1, the squares are covered. So back to a3, king b6, knight c4, king takes a6. And I don't feel too optimistic about that. So let me go back to that line. Knight b6, king d4, knight c4, king c5, knight takes a3, king takes c6, knight b1, bishop e1. What if we go f5 or something in there? Because the knight okay, I'm starting to envision one of those situations where white can liquidate on the queen side, but my king gets into the game and I can eat up all the pawns on the king side. And if I can get a position where it's like king and h and f, and I've sacked my knight for the remaining pawn, depends on the white king position, but I should be able to win the game. So part of the process here for me when trying to solve an ending is to envision first ways I can lose it. And I feel like f5 gives me a high chance of losing with the king position on e4. Then next I look at it and I go, okay, I said 3 candidate moves. We need to look at c5 as well. Knight b6 had this calculation, but then at the same time, the more that I looked at the position, then I want to get to my third candidate move, which I didn't mention before, c5. And c5 has the added benefit of getting rid of that c6 weakness. If white doesn't take, c4 is a protected pass pawn forever. If white does take, my knight gets to a better square, and then I can simply go back and shuffle begins. So I'm pretty sold on c5 at this point. Okay. That way. Well, you're making me want to test the position over here. That is definitely not going to do it, because now I don't have any weaknesses to worry about, and my king can get to an excellent position. This is 100% going to lose for white. a5 is the first reaction. Remember, if you get too overzealous, the only thing that can hurt us is the white king. So if the white king stays out of the action, the knight will dominate the b. a5, bishop moves. King c4, king f4, b4, pawn takes, king e5, push. And it depends on where the bishop is going. Probably like f8, so it can come back to g7 and defend that way. So is there any hurry here? No, there's not. So why try to force things if there's no hurry? Why not improve the knight and assure a pass pawn? Knight d8, knight c6, a5, b4, and then go from there. Simple chess, eliminate opponent counterplay. So let's go with that. I didn't want to play a5 immediately because then my knight wouldn't have the flexibility that I have here. And now there's no king f4. That makes the situation even worse because my king can now improve and all the entry points are covered. So now let's go ahead and do a little fox in the chicken coop type situation. While you're going to worry about the pawn, I'm going to go after the other side. And they all fall. Let's not leave anything to chance here. All the pawns, all of them. Knight's in perfect placement, no weaknesses. Nope. Okay, what's going to be the fastest? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. You know what? Go with the simplest. Like, when in doubt, always go with the one that has the least chance of stalemate, even if it's a little bit slower. Completely fine. Okay, definitely getting harder as 2500 Beth is more difficult to deal with, but still has an advantage and starts to pitch it at certain points unnecessarily. At least I feel like it was an instructive endgame. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Like I'm actually I had to take a break after the first day because I realized I was actually going to have to think when it came to playing in these next games. Fun stuff. I really like what chess.com has done with the bots. It's good. You should check it out.